Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.
Financial Survival Network is presented to you by Regal Assets. Buy and sell physical gold and silver through your existing retirement plan, 100% tax-free with Regal Assets. If you want to include physical gold or silver in your existing IRA or old 401k, request your free investment kit, which was recently featured in the Forbes and Smart Money Wall Street Journal magazines. Call toll-free 855-678-6620, 855-678-6620, or visit regalassets.com. You know, it's been 5 years since the so-called Great Recession took hold, and some of us might even call it the Greater Depression. But it seems like 5 years on, as Ambrose Evans Pritchard said, the Great Recession is turning into a life sentence. And Danielle Park of jugglingdynamite.com has some comments on this. So we're going to talk to her. Hey, Danielle, welcome back. And how was the vacation?
Fine. Working vacation as always, but all well. Not complaining, Carrie. Very good. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm about to go on to one of those working vacations next week, and I can hardly wait.
Good.
So 5 years on in the Great Recession, and there's no end in sight, is there?
Well, yeah, I think there's an end in sight. We've had this sort of folly before where some say it's hopeless, it'll never fix itself. I say it will. I think we're starting to come to the end of the end in the sense of the nonsense that's gone on for the last 5 years, the pretend and extend, the intervention, the let's rescue it with more debt approach that's been the mainstay of everything that's been tried since the last recession, quote unquote. I think it's really extended the pain, and it would be lovely to have more accomplished for the angst we've been through than we presently do. But I do think that, the realization is slow to set in. And history tells us this, Carrie, that you have these periods where it does take a decade or so before the dirt finally gets cleansed from the system and before, the prices really get reset to reality and debt actually is written off. And, I have been one of the people that has said from the beginning, and this is just based on a very humble, study and training in actual bankruptcy reorganization in real companies and real households, that people that have too much debt have to actually write it off. They can't continue to service it. They can't, consume on top of egregious debt payments and continue to function. That's the very nature of bankruptcy when you finally, say, I give, and the creditors have to accept that they shouldn't have lent you as much money. So I think that article from Ambrose is good in that, it just comes back to, look, one way or another, this debt will be written off. You'll either do away with it with inflation, which I think is very difficult to accomplish in this particular set of facts, because we're not talking about one country or one company or one family. We're talking about most of the world having the same chronic debt problem, and that's extremely deflationary. So if you can't inflate your way out of the problem, what are you going to do? You're going to have to admit default and write off zeros.
And that's what nobody is willing to do, because the banksters who are running the system, for them, writing all this stuff off is death. It's the end. It's an existential question. So when they're talking about national solvency or survival of their institutions and their ability to exploit the current system, they're going to take this thing out to the end. And we're almost, I hate to paraphrase one of my other guests, but this is a question of good versus evil almost.
Yeah, I have actually seen it that way myself in many ways. I think that those who wish to stand up for truth and disclosure need to do so. And this is my complaint. I go back to, you and I were just kibitzing about the U.S. election, and the very weak field, in my view, that Americans have to choose from here between the two candidates. And Mr. Ryan coming on board, and the budget, and all of it making very little mathematical sense at all. No adult conversations have yet been entered into. And so you get a sense that, if this is our choices, if there's only bad leaders, what is a democracy to do? And I think that the right thing to do is to do the right thing, is to keep calling BS on things, is to keep going back to the math, is to not, put on the blinders and fall back to sleep in apathy, or say, oh, God help them. They're in a broken system. They can't be better leaders because they can't do anything. I say don't take the job. I say if you can't, it goes back to being a money manager. What I do in this climate, it's hard to do today. It's hard to do it well. It has been for, 15 years. It's been a very challenging climate. So here's the choice. Either don't do the job and go find something else to do. But if you're going to do it in honor of the people you're serving. Don't, do what's easy. Don't do what's reckless but, looks flashy. Do the right thing and keep walking your talk. And I think that's what we need all over the place. We need that in individuals, accountability for their own behavior. We need it in politicians. If they are in a broken Congress and they can't get anything passed, I think they need to go on television. They need to tell the people, here's what we need to do to fix this. Here's what we can accomplish. And I'm going to resign if nothing can improve. I think that's the kind of personal action we need in leaders right now.
I couldn't agree with you more. I remember somebody once saying, if this is a government by the people, where can I sell my share? And, it's absurd because there's nothing getting done here and there's no recognition of the problem. And that just allows a problem that's not in your mind. It's not that it went away. It's just that it's getting worse. It's metastasizing. And eventually you have to face the music, but by that point, man, any solution becomes much more painful.
Well, yes, and the economy, believe it or not, is still relevant, I believe, although it can be, hijacked, manipulated, and misreported in various ways. But the recession, I believe, has begun globally, and it will continue to disappoint on the revenue side. And this is what we're noticing in all of the, some of the companies we're managing earnings beats. But Carrie, the bottom line is a much more massaged entity than the top line. And the sales data, if you look at the U.S. Small Business Index survey recently, the National Federation of Independent Business came out with their July report, and the number one problem reported by small business is poor sales. That's their top concern. It's not lack of confidence. It's not overregulation. It's no sales growth. And that is hard to rationalize because you're seeing it in China with their export numbers falling and their stock market continuing to head down and reflect that. You're seeing it in U.S. exports, falling now for the past several months. Basically, every country in the world is experiencing contracting revenue. And that really matters because even the fairy tale budgets that many politicians have come up with in the last couple of years or proposals always overestimate the sales side, right? They don't acknowledge that we're in this post-credit bubble, deflationary cycle where consumers continue to retrench over a decade or so. And yet the data now, we're coming into the third recession since this secular bear period began, and that means all the expectations of revenue is going to be disappointing again. And I think that's where you finally get a capitulation phase again. And I think it's not too far from here because whether we change political parties in the fall or not in the U.S., I think is irrelevant to this overarching theme that everyone's overestimated the amount of sales they're going to be able to get out of the world. Whether they do more QE, whether Ben Bernanke, announces something August 31st at Jackson Hole. Really, fine, announce it, go ahead. I don't know for sure that he will, because I think he's got some constraints in the system now with food inflation that's coming on the fore, with gas prices now back up 40 cents in the last little bit. That's all going to hit consumer sales in the back to school season, that sort of thing. So I think this motion is already in play. This recession's already here, and they can sprinkle some spice on it, but really it's not going to change the overall theme, and that'll be a cathartic force for the next several months.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a perfect storm coming, and they're just trying to put it off till after the election, so then they can really deal with it, because the political choices are really existential for these politicians. If they do what has to be done and they don't present it properly to the citizenry, they're done. They're gone. They'll just be booted out of office. Not that they shouldn't be, because I personally think that most of the politicians that are in office now are sociopaths who couldn't care less about the long-term viability of the countries that they're representing, and the world, and the people who are, you're suffering and you're out of a job and you're dependent upon handouts. That's the thing. They always talk about the welfare, and people want it. I believe that the newly dependent class doesn't want to be dependent. They've never been dependent in their lives, and they've been self-sufficient, and they've bought into the American dream, and now they're screwed because they couldn't save, they don't have enough savings, and they have no means of getting back what they've lost. And that is disconcerting to me. But they don't want to be dependent upon the government for their sustenance. Nobody who's ever worked on their own or been in a business wants to be dependent.
I agree with you. I think that's true, and I think that's why I have some faith in the human spirit and the ability over thousands of years to find our way from, one mess to the next, perhaps, but also for periods of goodness in there. And I think that, it's a new paradigm that's required. When I was working at a major sell-side institution and woke up in the 90s and realized that it was a disastrous cesspool and I wanted nothing to do with it, I didn't, become unemployed and be lost. I decided to start something fresh, and that's what we did with our company. That's been the salvation of my faith, that people can go back to what they know to be right and start from square one. Now, I realize not everyone can start their own independent asset management company, but that clip I put on the blog this week about eating our landscape? There's another example of people who go back to grassroots. They don't have all this hierarchy and bureaucracy. They don't look for government handouts. They just say, hey, why are we wasting all this public space around here with concrete or prickly bushes? Why don't we put some food in that people can learn from, do some hard labor, actually understand about agriculture again? Why don't we just do grassroots stuff? And if you get on with that, I remember my dad talking about in the Second World War how, he was in Belfast as a kid and they were poor and there was no work unless people were away at the war. The women worked in the factories. But basically the kids had to make money too. They would go around picking up lumps of coal off the coal carts and they would sell that for some money. I know that's, again, a very extremely humble example, but I think that the more we get away from, these mental anchors on, I was some idea of what you did for a living. I was that, therefore I can't do anything else. If there's no need for, real estate or mortgage brokers in the economy right now, I'm done. I can't figure it out. Well, you can actually figure it out. Stop talking about what you're entitled to. Stop talking about how much you won't settle for work less than X, and just go out and pick up a shovel or pick up something and add value somewhere. I think if individuals go back to what can they be creative about, what solutions where can they add value, start small and humble. You don't need a fleet of trucks with the logo on the door, the first week you get going. And I think in that, if you've got to give to get mentality, if we can get back to that, I believe that people will find their way through this period and will come out of it much stronger and more invigorated down the road.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, once upon a time, kids had a paper route, and that's where they got their spending money from. They earned it by delivering newspapers, which was a useful thing. Now, obviously, The newspaper route business in the U.S. went from kids to immigrants, and now it's getting killed by the internet. But the point is, you need to be looking at ways to bring in income and know, like, that's beneath me and I should be doing something else. In any event, Danielle, it's encouraging, but it's a little scary. And I think as the next phase unfolds, we're going to figure this thing out one way or the other. At least I'm optimistic that we will. So to find you and your blog, jugglingdynamite.com and venablepark.com, right?
That's right.
All right. Well, we will talk to you in a couple of weeks. You be well. And enjoy the rest of the summer because it's rapidly coming to an end.
That's it. Exactly. You too, my friend. Thank you.
All right. Take care.